A thing that's called, or someone that's completely mentally healthy?
Absolutely not.
I'm 100% me.
Absolutely not. Then you would not be a person who had a childhood and has things happen to them along the way. And actually, you would not be a human being.
Welcome to another insightful episode of What Went Wrong. Today, we are speaking to a wise mind, a clinical psychologist, Dr. Phiwe Lufele. We are here to find out about the causes of depression and its lead to suicide. Find out with us what went wrong.
So the work that I do is in mental health in terms of advocacy and also working with mental health care users. I work in the hospital context and I also run my own private practice as well.
What drew you to this kind of work? What made you choose to study in this field?
Sure, what a difficult question. I'm not sure if I chose psychology more than, while I was studying. I mean, I was enrolled for a different degree, and one of the electives that I could take was psychology. And it just started helping me with some of my own things that I had been struggling with. It opened my eye to so many things. I think the only thing that I did know was that I really loved children. And so after my first year of doing psychology, I was like, I'm going to take this leap and I'm going to just try. Which was a big leap because it's very difficult to qualify as a psychologist. At the time. So you don't just qualify with a degree. You need a master's degree for you to be able to practice. And at every kind of milestone, they take less and less people, which was something that I didn't know going in. So at an honors level, I think there were about 15 of us in class. And at a master's level, I think in my class, there were 12 of us. And it's obviously different institutions take different numbers, but it's around between 10 and 12 that they'll take for a master's program. And it's not very easy to get into it. I didn't know that going into it.
You found out inside.
I found out significantly, and it was too late at that point. Really.
Let me just continue and finish. But how has the journey been?
I think the journey has been a lot of things personally for me. It has been very challenging to myself. It has also been an incredibly fulfilling journey as well. And I can't imagine myself doing anything else.
Does it make you then look at yourself, even as you study, turn to yourself and evaluate yourself, your own mind and your own mental health as well?
Look, I think you can't do the job if you don't. It's very difficult to, part of it is relating to other people, and the way in which we relate to other people is the way in which we relate to ourselves. And so it's such an important part of it. And so, you absolutely have to.
Look at yourself. Evaluate.
Yeah.
So today we're speaking about mental health. We're talking about depression and suicide. What are the signs that as a community we need to look out for in our families, in the workplace, in the church, wherever we are? What are the signs that we need to watch out for? Then perhaps they are depressed.
Look, I want to first start off by saying that, you know, suicidality as a concept forms part of a lot more mental health issues than just depression. And, you know, we talk about it a lot in the context of depression. Because that's what we mostly have access to, which is a great way to start, and it's a great conversation starter. And I'm happy that, you know, people are starting, well, not starting, I think we really are engaging in that. However, you know, there's a vast number of, you know, mental health care issues.
Tell us.
So, for an example, from the end of the spectrum in terms of psychosis, you know, so somebody who maybe has schizophrenia, somebody who's maybe in a psychotic episode of bipolar, you know, could experience suicidality as part of a delusion. So there will be a voice that tells them to hurt themselves, to harm themselves, or they will see danger in front of them, and, you know, it feels like the only kind of way that they can escape the danger is if they hurt or harm themselves. So that's like one end of the spectrum. And then, you know, in terms of the other end of the spectrum, which is more depression, if we think about depression, we can think about it in two ways. We have a unipolar depression, which would just be the downside of depression, and then you'd have a bipolar depression, which is what we would then call, you know, somebody who has extremely high highs and then extremely low lows. And that kind of forms part of, you know, a kind of like almost chemical imbalance in their brains, but is also exacerbated by, you know, life circumstances. So if we think about a unipolar depression, a lot of the time people will withdraw, they'll start to isolate themselves, they'll become more negative in the way that they speak, they become more irritable, you know. So a child kind of drops something and say, yeah, shouty wala you know. They will a lot of the time feel quite low on most days. It becomes harder to get out of bed. They're either sleeping a lot or they're struggling to stay asleep or fall asleep. Food is also something that we look at. So how much somebody is eating. Are they eating too much or are they eating too little? So appetite could be affected. So there's a lot of things that can be affected. Negative kind of thinking, negative self-talk. They become more hopeless about life. Everything is kind of doom and gloom. And it's hard to get out of it. You know, I know a lot of people will just be like, okay, just, you know, snap out of it. Like, you know, life is good, you know. But for those people, you know, they're really in a very dark place and they can't see the light that's outside. I'm going to give this description because I found it very helpful. Somebody once described their depression as them being in a glass room, right? And they can see that there are people on the outside and they can see that, you know, people are knocking, trying to get in, but they just can't get out of this bubble that they're in. And it feels very, very dark and they're struggling to find a door out of it. And I found that to be a really great description because people can be like, but I was here for you, I asked you, you know, you shut me out, I listened, you know. And that can be the experience of depression. Even though there are people around, you can feel like you're alone. And so that would be the unipolar. And then, like I said, the bipolar, they would have both of those. So, you know.
Very low and very high.
Yeah. So on the high end, they feel like they can, you know, achieve anything and they do really, really great things. They're invincible, you know, sometimes they engage in risky behavior, you know, going out more, drinking more, the use of substances. And then once they hit their lows, it becomes the darker side,
And so what would be, is there a cause to depression or it's a disease that attacks our minds?
Plenty causes. Some of them are just genetic, right? So like I said, chemical imbalances, which is why medication is very important, and this is why we have psychiatry to assist us. And then also just interpersonal life difficulties as well. You know, we also have people who really struggle interpersonally. They struggle to regulate their own emotions. And, you know, those people kind of, they don't know how to, and so they kind of need to be taught, like, how do you regulate your emotions? How do you deal with life problems? Yeah. And so lots of different, but I think I would say a lot of it is, you know, societal, our norms in terms of how do we view it, how do we talk about it, how do we teach our children to deal with their own emotions. You know, also how much time do we have that we can dedicate to that.
Yeah.
And then also a very big genetic component. So if there is a history of mental health issues in your family, and lots of people don't even know that.
Yeah.
You know, we have lots of patients in the hospital. We'll do like psychoeducation, and they'll be like, hey, man, that sounds like malume, or that sounds like whoever. And we've kind of like just normalized it. Malume, so yeah.
So how do we recognize the signs within ourselves, like mina ngiyibuke nguzanele ukuthi hayi Zanele yabo musu wenza kanje, maybe go and seek help? What are the signs that we must look for internally, even as I sit, which this behavior of mine, that these thoughts are not normal?
Look, I think perhaps what I would like us to get to is the normalizing of, you know, engaging in mental health before we get to mental illness, right?
Yeah.
And so, and I mean, resources are an issue, but, you know, like just engaging in your mental health, you know, how do you keep yourself happy? What makes you happy? Exercising is very important. Going outside is very important. Engaging with people, having, you know, good relationships is very important. However, you know, I think some of the things that we can look out for, you know, once you start not wanting to engage with people, you know, you come home and really just want to go straight to your bedroom and you just want to sleep. You know, you're getting into more arguments with people, or you're feeling more like, you know, attacked by people. You are struggling to sleep. I think that's usually the first thing that we can look at, you know. How much are you able to sleep? How much are you resting? I think also looking into, you know, food, your appetite. Are you eating well? Are you struggling to eat? Are you eating too much?
The kind of food we eat as well.
Yeah. As well. All of those things are important. But I think usually the very first indicator is sleep and withdrawal from people. So if you're like avoiding people more, you're no longer answering your phone, you know, so that for me would be like where it's like, okay, maybe we need to see someone.
Let me look at myself. And so you mentioned that you work both in a hospital setting and you also have your private practice. So roughly in 1 month, how many people do you see? And do you find that the people that you see personally in terms of gender, is it more female or males? And in terms of age groups, is it young people? Is it older people? What kind of people are reaching out that you're seeing?
Sure, very interesting question. So I currently work at a private hospital, and in the private hospital, it is less hectic than you would in a public hospital. So I have also worked at a public hospital at Chris Hani Baragwanath. And so I'm going to talk about both of those things because I think that it's helpful. You know, at Chris Hani Baragwanath, you will see anything between like maybe 4 or 5, or you could see like 12, 13, 15, maybe even patients in a day. And a lot of the work that you do there is, you know, helping survivors of suicide mostly, and then you will see people for therapy, and then you also have to see people in group settings because we just don't have the resources. So if you add the group setting, you're likely seeing about 20, 30 people in a day. But it really does help us to see people in group settings because then we get to a lot more people. If you get to the private sector, you know, on a regular day, I'll see about 6 or 7 people. Mostly for individual therapy. So an individual therapy session, it's about an hour. So you can imagine that, you know, if you're seeing
Yeah.
like 6 or 7 people, it's kind of it's your
It's a whole
day.
day. It's a whole day.
It's
Yeah.
your whole day. And yeah, so it's kind of around those numbers. So it depends. Are you seeing people in a group setting? You'll reach more people like that, and you'll be able to teach more like that and contain a little bit more. And then if you're seeing people more in individual, that's kind of like more your long-term work.
Okay.
It requires more resources as well. You need to have a lot more financial resources as well. But also in the public sector, we do see people for therapy. It's just that, you know, the waiting lists will be very, very long. It will take some time before you're seen. And even in some spaces, they can only offer like 6 or 8 sessions. Yeah, but I think on both sides, we're trying quite hard.
Yeah, are you sure?
Yeah.
And is it like, are you seeing more females or males in the age group as well, or is it just similar?
That question is a complex question because, you know, in the psychiatric wards, which is where we work a lot, you will see a lot of male patients presenting with psychosis.
Okay.
You will also see a lot of female patients, but there are a lot of male patients that present with psychosis and a lot of substance use and substance abuse as well.
So explain psychosis to us.
So psychosis is where you will hear things that other people don't hear. You will see things that other people don't see.
Okay.
You will have delusions, you know, some of which could be like paranoia, you know, you'd feel like people are following you, things like that. But it's like at a more like extreme kind of, you know. So, I mean, we all have sort of our own kind of delusions.
Yes. I think there's always a measure.
There's always a measure, you know. So in that context, you will see lots of males. Very few males actually present for psychotherapy. You will see that you will see more males in private.
Oh, okay.
You'll still see more females in terms of the numbers, but you will also see males more in private. And I think a lot of that has to do with male mental health. It's not really something that's prioritized. It is also a very touchy and difficult subject to even engage in. And also it just feels like there's a long history of not prioritizing it, of maladaptive ways of coping for men that has become part of what we call masculinity.
Yeah, men were strong.
Yeah. And so it's difficult to break those things down, and it's difficult to have those conversations, which is why you'll then see a lot more psychosis, and a lot more substance use and substance abuse, because those are, you know, some of our ways of trying to cope.
So does that mean then the illness has been there for a while and then presents itself as a psychosis later, years later?
Absolutely. I mean, so if you think about the times in which people are more at risk, so your early 20s is where lots of mental health issues will start to surface. That's just genetic. But also, you also have what we call substance-induced psychosis. So substances can induce psychosis. So you could have a dormant kind of psychotic gene that is activated by a substance. Most of which would be, and I mean, I know that it's largely kind of accepted, and you can get a lot of backlash for talking about it, but cannabis. You know, is a substance that does really activate a lot of psychosis. And then, I mean, on a harder spectrum, you know, some people also alcohol as well can activate psychosis. But also, if you think about your nyaube, your you know, cocaine, all of those kind of drugs as well.
Then does that. So
yeah.
Ababiyeke nje bahlukane nentangu bahlukane notshwala mengavumi yekela
akuvumi.
Ayi siyezwa impela. So now moving to suicide, which is a much harder subject, and we've seen it play out in South Africa in the last year, in a couple of months. Just people committing suicide, and there's a whole lot of other people that we don't hear of. but there's a lot that we know that are celebrities that have committed suicide. What are the mostly causes of someone deciding to commit suicide?
Sure, that's a very difficult question to answer because I think that it is different.
It's a variety
for each person. Like I said, we have, suicidality as part of a mental illness. So people that are more likely to hit very low lows and consider suicidality. We also have people that have a difficulty regulating their emotions, and they are quite impulsive in their kind of like makeup, in their personality and in their genetic makeup. They're more impulsive, and so would attempt suicide a lot more easily than perhaps somebody who doesn't have that kind of personality structure. And also some of it can be that, with more of an impulsive kind of engagement in suicidal behavior, surviving the suicidal behavior can then, sort of create that cycle where it feels like, I survive it, I survive it, I survive it, I survive it. And a lot of those people will die by mistake. I think also that, it's important for us to speak about it very sensitively because, in my work, what I've found is that there are very few people that I've worked with that actually really want to die. People just mostly want the pain to stop. They don't want to be in this pain. They want to escape it. It's too much. It's overwhelming. And so once they've survived, it's like, thank goodness. But also they just want the pain to stop. And so that's why it's important for us to engage in the suicidal ideation, to engage in the thoughts, to talk about all of those things to help them process. Because a lot of the time you'll find that they actually don't want to die. They just want their pain to stop.
Because also when we read and do some research, you'll find that in with other people as a type of coping mechanism, they start cutting themselves. So is that some behavior that you find in your practice as well?
Yeah, so that would be more of, people that have more of a difficulty with regulating their emotions and regulating their affect. And sometimes the pain can be so much internally that it's like they need like a physical representation, like they'd like to feel a physical pain. Some people will describe it as, it reminds them that they're still alive because on the inside they feel so dead. And it can also become quite a maladaptive way of coping, because people end up cutting more and more, and it becomes a big problem
for their health. And so you speak about you see a lot of people. You work in the private sector, in hospital. How do you take care of your own mental health?
Sure, I mean, I'm in therapy.
I'm sure it's important.
Very important. I think it's one of the things that I prioritize the most. Even if, I'm having a hard financial month, I'll prioritize my therapy because I'm prioritizing the inner child in me that, has her own hurts, has her own pains, and needs to work on and process a lot of that. And so I have been in therapy for years. It's something that I am very proud of and I am very happy to talk about all the time. And so I do that. I also, will exercise. I keep in contact with family and friends. I talk about difficulties. So I do a lot. I have my own kind of support system that is around me that, we will share with each other. We will help each other in different ways and at different times in our lives. And so, I mean, that's very important.
And so when we look at, you speak about therapy. So it's about therapy and depression. There's a lot of negative stigma around it. With how? So you're a psychologist, we are shine. How say I shine? or depression. Lona nje futhi abathanda ukubuka.
Yo.
So how do we as communities, as families, remove the stigma on both of those?
I think the first is that we need to talk about mental health.
Yeah.
And it's actually so weird because we don't talk about it, but it actually is around us all day, every day. It is the one consistent thing that is around us all day, every day. But we don't talk about it. One, I think we also don't talk enough about how hard life can be. We're very quick to motivate. So it's like, yo, today I'm having such a hard day.
Instead of listening.
You know, and really, I don't think that people do that to not be there for you. It's just that it's hard because when somebody talks about their pain, it can also take you to your pain.
Yeah.
And so, because it's hard for you to also tolerate your pain, you have to put a plaster quickly on this one so that your plaster can, you know, survive this as well. So I think the first is that we need to talk openly about mental health, which is, you know, I mean, it's something that we talk about on Twitter quite a lot. I mean, when I'm on social media, I see it a lot. I think we also need to destigmatize what does it mean to be mentally ill and what does it mean to be mentally healthy. And I think we need to change that language and we need to talk about, you know, the things that we struggle with. Rather than we are shy, you know. Perhaps I struggle to regulate my emotions. It's something that I know about myself. And so how am I going to help myself, you know? And how can other people help me as well? I think also we need to think very long and very hard about substances. And we need to think about how much we use them. We need to think about how we make it cool and we make it okay. And it's kind of like, you know, like I've heard somebody to a friend say, yo, you know, so it's just, I mean, we talk about it, so it's easier for us to talk about that, you know. So I think we really, as a country, we need to look at substances. So I think that too. I also think that we need to be more supportive
of each other.
And you know, I think also the idea you would see, you know, you know, they're an attention seeker. You know, maybe let's sit and think, you know, why would somebody seek attention? You know, if you're getting attention, why would you need to seek it? You know, and if we're more empathic and if we take ourselves out of a situation or the equation more and think about what does this mean for this person, then I think that we will make lots of great strides. But none of what I said is easy.
So we need to be selfless. That's myself. Selfless.
None of what I said is easy, and I say it knowing full well that is not an easy thing to do. But I think that we can try.
Because everyone has their own struggles. Is there a thing that's called, or someone that's completely mentally healthy?
Absolutely not.
I'm 100% me.
Absolutely not. Then you would not be a person who had a childhood and has things happen to them along the way. And actually, you would not be a human being.
Because many things affect us. Perhaps you grew up in a home where your parents got divorced. Akukhulunywa ngaleyo nto badivorcile nje. Kodwa a child look eyibuza kwenzekani uphi ubaba uphi umama. So perhaps those things that we grow up with then affect us. Look see push at the back of our minds, and then one day this is
absolutely. Or even, you know, somebody who grows up in, you know, a home that, you know, has everything, inverted commas, in terms of the material. And they go on and they study and, you know, they start working and everything seems so great, but it's hard for them to fail at anything. Because there was this great pressure for them to do well and to not make mistakes. So sometimes we can see things as, that person has got it so much better. They've got it all together. But even those people have their own struggles. And so there isn't a single human being that is completely resolved and completely mentally healthy. That person would not be a human.
Would be in the earth.
Yeah.
So how do we, as parents, as families, grandparents, how do we try to our ultimate best to create a home that will have or produce abantu that are normal, but or maybe are able to cope with their feelings and recognize their own feelings? How do we have that home senzani practically in the home?
I think I really like how you asked that question. How do we produce people that are able to cope? Because we always will have things, and it really is about how do we cope with those things. Look, I think first is that we need to look at ourselves, and we need to look at how do we deal with things. So it's hard for you to teach a child how to cope with their emotions if you can't with yours, you know.
Okay.
If a child makes a mistake, and so we are chikana, so we are mshaya, so we are all of these things, and that actually points us to a problem with you. And what you're then doing is that you're teaching your child lots of things. One is that they can't make mistakes. Two is that when they do make a mistake, the consequence is such a hectic consequence. So it's physical pain. And then we wonder why now we have more people that hit each other, that, you know,
GBV.
are violent, gender-based violence, all of those kind of things, you know. And, you know, it is with a good intention. You're disciplining your child, but there are very many different ways in which we can discipline children. And so I think we first need to look inward to ourselves. Second is to be able to sit with a child and teach them their emotions. So lots of people can identify anger and happiness.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to identify what else lies
In between.
You know,
Yeah.
there's frustration, there's happiness, there's love, there's so many emotions that people just find difficulty recognizing, engaging in. And so sometimes we think we're angry, but actually you're sad.
Yeah.
Or you think you're happy, but actually you're overwhelmed. And so because you're overwhelmed, you're engaging in all of this behavior that looks happy. But you're actually not happy. And so we need to get into the culture of talking about our emotions. What are they? And there's so many emotions. And so we need to engage in all of them.
And recognize them. Do you find that social media plays a role in some of the cases that lead to depression and all of the illnesses in our health?
Look, absolutely. I think social media is just a microcosm of society, really. Because the people that are behind the phones are real people that exist in
real life.
In society and in real life. It's easier for people to hide on social media, and so, you know, it does become a problem. But also, you know, I mean, a Ntabiseng who is going to bully somebody on Twitter is also a Ntabiseng who's going to bully somebody in real life.
Okay.
And so it's just a microcosm of it, and so absolutely it does.
It does. Also, maybe pressures of saying, uzanele, usene frontal. Those pressures to say, hangasala.
What does it mean about me?
Ngizofika kanjani lapha emcimbini? So ama pressures njalo, we need to recognize that awunayo unale.
But even if you think about it, even before there was social media, you know, if you didn't have, I mean, I remember in school during Phiwe's day, you know, it was such big pressure. You go to
I remember.
And did I wear these shoes last year? Because if I wear them again this year, you know.
Yeah.
And so social media, it just shows us at a greater magnitude what we do to each other in real life. Sinjalo nje.
Hey madoda, awidli sushi when busy no put. So to someone who's struggling with their mental health at this time, what would be your message to them? What would be a practical thing for them to do right now to receive help?
I think the first would be to normalize. It's okay to not be okay. And I think that we have a great difficulty with not being okay. And our relationship with not being okay is actually not very healthy. It's okay for us to struggle. It's okay for us to be anxious. It's okay for us not to have a great day every day. So I think that's the first thing, is that it's okay to not be okay. And once we make it okay for us not to be okay, then it's easier for us to reach out. It's easier for us to say, listen, today I'm not having a good day. And, maybe I need help, or I need time away, or what do I need in that instance. So I think those two things first. I think the third thing would be to reach out for help. There are lots of services that are available, some of which are free to a minimum charge in the public sector. Community clinics are very helpful. So not every community clinic will have a psychiatrist and a psychologist, but you can find out which ones do. You also have your tertiary hospitals that have departments, psychology departments and psychiatry departments. And so even if you don't have, the funds you can access that as well. And then if you do have the funds, there are different platforms. Psychology Today online just gives you a whole bunch of therapists that are available to see you in different areas. I know Therapy Route as well. You can just go online, psychologist in Rosebank, wherever, and a bunch of people will come out, and you can find out what they charge, and you can go and see them. And then I think also we need to support each other as well. And let's not make it a secret. Let's not make it this big bad wolf, you're one therapist and nobody can know. Let's normalize it. And that's why I start with, it's okay for you not to be okay.
And also, as we were speaking, I'm just thinking of social media as well. You have your pages like your LinkedIn, and people are posting, I'm a workaholic, I'm a perfectionist. Do those things also add up to finally vele siba ma workaholic, finally vele siba ma perfectionist? Is it possible? Or siyayipressurize so lead into depression ngoba sifuna ukuba ilezi zinto ezingekho?
You see, like the example that I made a little bit earlier, if we don't give ourselves room to make mistakes, when you do make a mistake, it becomes very difficult to deal with it. But also, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't work all the time. You have to have fun. You have to engage with other people. You have to go out and have a drink once in a while. You have to go for a hike once in a while. You have to exercise. You have to, there's so many things. Life is not a linear thing, and it's not only about one thing. And it can seem that way because we're chasing something. We're chasing this, big success and whatever. But actually life is about happiness. And sometimes for your happiness, you need to focus more on work and less on this. But also at a different time, you're going to have to focus less on work and more on something else. Otherwise, your circle can never be balanced. What I usually like to do is draw a circle. And in the circle, we'll put family, relationships, we will put fun, we will put hobbies, we will put work, we will put all of these things that are important to you or that you engage in, right? And in that circle, there's no way that you can give 10%, 10%, 10% to everything. There's no way. Otherwise you're never going to learn how to play the piano if you're only giving 10% to the piano. True. But maybe at a certain time you need to give 20% to the piano. And there's somewhere else that you're not going to give as much of your attention. And that's okay. But that circle needs to consistently be under review and consistently be changing and moving. And so if right now you're giving 50% to work and everything else takes 50%, if your child is ill, it might be important for you to give less to work and focus on your child. And so it can never be a fixed thing. And so, in ending, agna formula, guys.
Sibheke nje wena.
Sibheke, find things that are important to you, and sometimes you just have to be selfish about yourself.
Uyinakekele nje.
Uyinakekele.
Ngoba ungasekhona kuzoba khona ba.
Kuzoba khona bani.
Akasekho. So the gist of it is that we need to take care of each other and sinakane nokuthi in the family how wangabe sa behavior ngalendlela esimazi wathula kangaka wayivalela uyabo ukuthi akasafani naqala and then start engaging in how much of how big is it communication, big of a role does communication play in all of our relationships, in all kinds of at work, at home, everywhere? How important is communication?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think we communicate in lots of different ways. If I came to this interview and I was sitting like this and here you are asking me questions, I'm communicating something. I'm communicating that I don't want to be here. I don't want to engage.
Not
with
interested.
You. And so the ways in which we communicate can be verbal, can be non-verbal.
Yeah.
And sometimes we communicate. I mean, there was one thing that you always hear, uthi ngikushaya because ngiyakuthanda. Like a parent will say, I'm hitting you because I love you. But what you're communicating is that love has to be hard, and love has to be painful, and it has to hurt, and it can never be gentle and kind, and it can never allow you to make mistakes and maybe even repeat them later on, and take you through that journey. And allow you a space to figure out who you are. But now you have to be a specific person because mom has decided that this is who you're going to be, and and so the ways in which we communicate are very important, and we need to take stock of ourselves. And so if in a relationship I communicate that I love you by hitting you, then there's something that it says about me. There's something that I'm struggling to cope with, and something that I'm struggling to regulate in myself. And so we need to take stock of those things. We need to be very careful about how we communicate, what we want to communicate, and is it helpful or is it unhelpful? I mean, I never talk about right and wrong. I mean, in certain situations, I think there really is a complete right and a complete wrong. However, we need to think about it more as, is it helpful or is it not helpful? Or to what extent is it helpful and to what extent is it not helpful? So we have to really look into how we communicate.
Mosakhuluma ngalokho ukuthi ngikushaya ngoba ngithanda ngikhumbula when we were growing up in Christian homes siyesontweni ke phela, and then when you listen to intshumayelo yey wayesabisa uNkulunkulu kazi uzokushisa akubula. So he was a scary God. Ha kizofa. But then when you speak about love, then when you look at the word of God, how this God is gentle, this God is loving. So as you were speaking, I was just thinking about that. Why? So as message could I lot of young tan, so we need to really
I think that's such an important thing to say, because when I then make a mistake, I can go back to my mom because I know that she loves me and she's going to be gentle and she's going to help me, rather than I've made a mistake and now I need to try and fix it myself, and part of how I'm trying to fix it myself lands me into more trouble and more trouble and
deeper and deeper and deeper. But then if we are able to be open and communicate and speak, then our children, our neighbors, our colleagues will be able to come and speak to us with their struggles as well.
Absolutely.
So where do we get you? You mentioned that you are on social media. If someone is seeking help, where can we get hold of you?
So I do have a page on Instagram. It is, I'm going to give it to you. I think it's Phiwe Lufele _ Clinical Psychologist, or it's Phiwe _ Clinical Psychologist. I'll give it to you. That is the platform in which I am available. On my own social media, I don't take on any patients or clients or potential clients on my own social media. So that I would not give out. But I am on Instagram, and that's my official page. Yeah, you were just asking about social media. Hey?
Yeah, just social. If you have like your office numbers as well, or email, work email, please give it to us.
Okay, so I will also give you my business card, but I am available on email. Email is usually a better way to get a hold of me, because sometimes I am, with clients and I can't answer my phone. But my email address is just my surname and my name, lufelephiwe@gmail.com, and my cell phone number is 078-104-5423, and I'm available on both those. And
so just your parting message to all of us, as South Africans, as Africa, as the world, what would you say that it's important that we do to take care of our mental health?
Sure. I think I'll say what I said earlier. It's okay for us not to be okay. And it's okay for us to get to a place of being okay. And it's okay for us to be gentle with each other and kind and loving, and create an environment where we can all have the opportunity to self-actualize. Which, for me, self-actualization is happiness. Yeah. And find out what makes you happy. What makes you happy? What makes each of us happy. I like going to the ocean. It just makes me happy. I just see the waves, or climb a mountain, and it makes me happy. So we need to each realize what makes us happy, and then we will be a much healthier society. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much. We've learned a lot. This was a lot of fun. Thank you so much. Siyabonga kakhulu. Sifundile.